Hello and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system, particularly working on this compensation dashboard. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, founder and principal consultant of Prairie HR Solutions. And in this video, I'd like to build out or begin building out at least our market comparison piece. If you watched the previous episodes, you may have remembered that we had three buttons up here: compensation, benefits, and then a market comparison button up here. After a little bit of thought, I realized that it probably would be easier just to have this market data piece kind of hidden, because we have our discretionary payment as well as our leave. And in order to compare what we're paying our current employees or groups of employees based on job title, we would need the market comparison. So I just figured it would be easier to consolidate this into one compensation view. And the idea is that once this data here is populated and each point has been essentially assigned, assessed, analyzed, all that jazz, then we want to populate it down here. And that's what I've already started doing here. I essentially just copied and pasted these input boxes here. And then I replicated what we did here with our average base pay and our average experience, and then just added it to also populate here and here. And then I created simply a mock button. And this button doesn't do anything yet. It's just there for a placement. And then I decided to break down our market and our company pay in sections. Now, the idea of this is I would like to take some salary survey data that we compiled, and this is a fictitious company with randomized data. So, I mean, I'm not too worried about the validity of this as it relates to that randomized data. I'm just working on the functionality and wanting something to be populated in here. So I didn't go into, the job descriptions or the job analysis to make sure that I was, doing apples to apples. I made sure I was doing apples to apples, but I didn't go so far down as to, weighting individual jobs or things like that. I didn't do that, which you would typically do if you did a market salary survey or a market study. And then these little slide bars here. So the intent of these slide bars is I kind of went back and forth on if we wanted to just do a graph, sort of like we had up here, some sort of visual chart, or if that would have just been too much, because we already have a lot happening in this dashboard. And to keep that at a minimum, we decided to go against the graph and just use this sliding bar. So these sliding bars are inherent to Bootstrap. Since we're using Bootstrap as a front-end toolkit, let's go over to our Bootstrap page here, and I'll show you what we were looking at. So we were just trying to figure out if there was a way that they had something already built in that we could use to visualize the placement of the market salary in comparison to the company salary. And what we came up with was this range button. So this range is typically designed for input. When you think about a range, you're like, okay, well, I want to slide this a little bit and then I want it to do something when I let it go. Whether this is, I'm going to vote for 4, or, let's turn down the volume or the lighting or something like that. So it's typically, when you think of a range, it's an input based. Well, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and take this and flip it to where it's not input based, but output based, which means that we can take a number, set the minimum and the maximum, take a number, and then have this automatically move to whatever that value is. And then we can do that for the market and then also the company. So what we did was we grabbed this one here because it had the min and the max, of course. and we set that to 1. Let's go back over here to our code here, and I'll show you exactly what we did. So we set this to 1 because we obviously pay we pay our employees something, obviously. And then we did a max of 200,000. Now 200,000 is, that max is kind of arbitrary. I just put 200,000, but this max needs to be either at or higher than your highest paid employee. The reason for that is if you're charting this, you really do need to make sure that whatever it is you're charting fits in between this range, obviously. And then we gave it a value of 100,000. Now, one thing that we're going to have to handle is this max is not in a format that we have. And what I mean by that is, let's go back over here to our page here. Notice that when we populate data, we took it and changed it into a number and then did what's called we did a toLocal method, which changed it to these commas for the US. So our data is coming to us like this, which is going to be problematic when it's trying to figure out what range that is. So we'll have to deal with that. But once this is populated, and this populates, automatically here, it just, once this is populated, it then populates this. Now that is a well-paid financial specialist. Then we want to set this value here. So there's a couple things that I'd like to do here. And the first thing is, I would like to show you how I populated this by populating our job title. So we want our job title essentially to come up here and grab this value and then just throw it in here, because that way we're not having to scroll up and say, well, what job am I doing? If you're trying to do this market comparison analysis, then you should just have the job title right there. So let's jump over here and I'll show you how I did that. So first we need that job title ID, which is comp job title. So let's copy that. And where we're going to want to have that produced is after this for each runs and populates our all data global variable and then creates all of these arrays. And before it starts performing its calculations, we would like to just have that populated in there. And there's a reason why we're doing this before it runs these calculations. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. So first, let's create a variable to capture this right here. And this ID is comp jobs. So we want to capture whatever value is in here. So let's create a variable to do that. And we'll call this variable job title. And this job title is going to be equal to the ID comp jobs. And we're going to want to get the value of that and store it in this variable. Now what we're going to need to do is create a variable to store or align the focus on that comp market job title. So we can call this variable market job title, I suppose. Document, get element. Nope, that's not right. Get element by ID. And then we don't need to get the value of this yet because we're going to set it. And then all we need to do is take this market job title and set the value of that to the job title. So we can simply do market job title dot value equals job title. Now that should take care of that. So let's save it and go back, because now after it gets done pushing all of this information and creating these arrays up here, then it should do this really quick and then work on its calculations. Okay, so let's refresh this. Now whatever is in this job title piece here should populate down here in our market data. As you can see, it's all jobs. So then, and the reason why we did it in our header is we want it to come from this control and filter section. We don't want to do it separately. We're just adding on to it. So let's just pick operations specialist. Once operations specialist populates here, then it'll come down here and push that. Now, the reason why we did it before our calculations is this works great if we are doing job title series or job series classifications, whatever your organization calls them, as a whole. So if we're looking at all operations specialists, this works great. The problem is going to arise that we're going to need to solve is if we do a single employee. So we have a single employee here. We still have the average base pay and the average experience. Wow. But this job title isn't populating because we have it reset up here to its default of all jobs. So what we're going to need to do is eventually write an if statement to say that if this was triggered, then we need to jump in there and grab from the data whatever job belongs to employee number 16 and populate here. If not, it's just the value. So we'll have to do something with that, and we want to do that prior to running our calculations. Okay, so good. So now we have that. So now let's work on these sliders. So let's take this slider here and let's see if we can get the value and just populate it. I don't know, maybe here in this, we'll do the company first. Maybe here in this median, we'll just grab this, whatever value this is at when it moves. So first thing we're going to need is this median ID. So let's come back over here to our code. And now I haven't actually done this before, but it should work. So here is our org slider, and here's our median. That's the span. So we need to give our input here an ID. So let's give this an ID of, and we'll obviously have to do this for everyone. So let's figure out, let's go market org median. That will be our ID. So we can copy this and then we'll come up here. And since we're not really calculating anything, and this is just going to be, we'll just say this is a placeholder because we'll be removing this. So let's grab a variable and let's call this variable market org median. And that market org median is going to be equal to that ID after we get it. So get element by ID, that, and we don't want the value of that, but what we do want is the value of this, let's see, comp org average salary. So let's create yet another variable, and let's call that variable, we'll just call it what it is, average comp org average salary. Just call it right what it is there, and we'll do document element by ID, and that ID is going to be this thing right here. And we want the value of that. So now let's see if we can populate that value in our market org median span. So we want market org median dot value equals comp org average salary. So now let's save this and see how this works. because this is laying the foundation for how we're going to populate all of this. Because obviously what we're going to need to do is once we have the median here, and this is average, we'll just call this, now an average and a median is not the same thing. So I don't want to get that confused. It's just going to be the median. Now, for our sake of, no, you know what? Actually, let's take it down we'll take it down that level because average is not the same as median, and I don't want to get everybody confused just by getting this functional. So what we will do is we will find the median of the pay based on the lowest paid person in this job title and the highest paid person in this job title. So, but for now, let's just see if we can populate something in there. So let's refresh this. All right, so we should have, let's change this to developer. See how many people we got here. Oh, not too bad. 8. And then let's open this up. Okay, developer's populating. The average base pay is populating. And then let's see if it's populating in here. And it is. But it is because this is the old, so it's not actually updating here. So let's refresh this and see. We may have beaten the code running. Okay, so that's because it's grabbing this and then putting it in here, but this isn't firing. So let's see. Okay, so it's actually grabbing that value before it runs. That's what that is. So now when we click this is going to come down here into that. So that's actually what's happening in the order of operations there. What's occurring is before it runs the average piece, then what it's doing is it's grabbing what's there before it runs. So let's find out where our thing ends here. And then we'll place it there. So then it'll have the average salary and it will be setting that value in the box that we need, and then it will run it. So now let's change that. Come back over here and refresh this. And then it should catch up because we were beating the calculation, which does make sense. Okay, nothing's happening, so I think we screwed up when we, yep, there's a syntax error somewhere. So let's go back over here and see what we did. So our syntax error is probably because it's trying to do it twice. Salaries to locale. Let's just put this down here. Okay, good. So now let's see how that does. We'll refresh it. Okay, there you go. So now it calculates it, populates it, and then it can come down and grab it. So order of operations, we have to think that we have to make sure that we're not beating the population of something that we're trying to get. So now if we were to come up here and select operations analyst, then it should change perfectly. Okay, good. Good. So now let's try and do something to where instead of populating it here, we populate it as the value of this. Now the challenge with this is actually going to be this format here. We're going to have to change this format. And to do that, when we come back over here, we'll see that we took this string here, made it a number, sent it over to our calculate average salaries, and then made it a string again with our English US format, which gave it 2 decimal places. So what we're actually going to have to do is do that backwards. So we'll say this placeholder for median. So we're going to have to do that kind of backwards. And I'm going to introduce something that's kind of complex, but it'll be a nice code snippet for you to have should you ever have to do this. So let's create a variable and let's call this old market org salary. Spell it right. And this old market org salary is going to be equal to our document get element ID, and that ID that we're trying to get is this comp org salary. This thing right here. And then we're going to want the value of that. So there is our old number, that 91,000 thing that pops up or whatever it's going to be. So now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take this old market salary and turn it into a numeric string. And we want to remove this. And we want to remove this globally. So we don't want this to be one specific instance. We want it to be global. So how we're going to do that is using the replace method. So let's store this in another variable, and we'll call this variable, let's just call it numeric string. And we may have to change this later, but numeric string. Wow. Okay, try that again. Numeric string. And what this is going to be equal to, what we're going to make this variable equal to is the old market org salary dot replace, because we want to replace that comma with nothing. We don't want it to be there, so we just want to replace it completely. We can use /, identify the comma, another / with a G, which means it's global, and then what we want to replace it with, and we just want to replace it with a blank space. So now that takes it and removes the variable, or removes that comma, and essentially makes it more like just that straight up number going across. And then what we're going to need to do is turn it back into a number. And we've used this constructor before, but I want to introduce you to another constructor called parse float. So a number is either with decimals or without decimals. And when it is with decimal, it's called a float. And what we're wanting to do is use a method called parse float to turn it back into a number to ensure that it has those decimals. So let's come down here and let's create another one. And we will call this let market, because this is the one we're actually going to use. Call that market org salary. And we want to use this parse float method. And what we're wanting to float, as we call it, is this. Okay, so now let's explain what happened. It took this string here, it took this value that has a comma and decimals, stored it in a variable, and then it replaced the comma with nothing for every single instance. And then we took that and turned it into a number. And the reason we did that is our number should now look exactly like this format here. No commas. Now it will have a decimal, but no commas. So now what we can do is set that value. If this works, let's set this value to our company. Let's find our salary org, our company pay. So it's going to be this salary org slider. So let's copy this. Let's see if this works. Let's see if this works before we save it. Because right now we are simply saving that. So here we are. So now what we can do is select that salary org slider, and we can set the value of it to our market org salary. And then that should change. So let's see how that works. Let's see not only how it works, but let's see if it works. That's more important. Okay, so let's open up our market data here. Okay, good. So this changes to about 91,000. If this is 200,000, that's probably correct. And let's change this to, trying to think of, okay, finance specialist was pretty high. There you go. So now, cool. So now our range is adjusting based on this value right here, or this value right here. So now let's, I'm going to end this video here because the next one, I don't want to get into it because it's going to take about another 30 or so minutes. But what we're going to need to do is essentially populate the median pay for our data. And we can do that inside our code here. So we just simply add another calculation. We will find the lowest value, then the highest value, and then we'll find the median. And the way we'll do that is we will create ourselves a helper function, and that helper function will be specifically designed to do the median, just like we have for standard deviations and whatnot. So we hope this has been informative, and I'm kind of excited to get into the market salary because that's compensation is a place that I just naturally fall into. And I hope if you do enjoy what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, please take care.